do highly encourage moms that are on methadone to breastfeed their babies. These babies have been exposed to methadone throughout their pregnancy, so when they deliver, a lot of these babies can experience withdrawal symptoms, immediately, or, hours later, or sometimes days later. And so we do want to have moms understand how to comfort their babies and things that they can do to help their babies as they go through the withdrawal symptoms. And breastfeeding is one of the ways that we want them to understand that this does help their baby through their symptoms. A lot of healthcare people still don't understand that there's a lot of research out there being done on methadone and that it is safe now for moms to breastfeed. But we do discuss with them, if they're hepatitis C positive, that they still can breastfeed their babies. We go over pumping with them if they have cracked or bleeding nipples, that they can dump that milk until there's no longer any signs of infection or any breakdown, and then it's safe to go on feeding their babies. We can, if a mom is telling us that they are using drugs, we can do testing on the breast milk. We can also assist mom, we can help her through a pumping process and dumping her milk until she has clean urine toxins that will be able to let us provide that milk for her baby.
We call it kangaroo care just because it's like putting your baby right to your skin. The baby only has a diaper on, and you take everything off that's between you and the baby and give you some time just to have that baby and enjoy the touch and the rest that you both can reach when you're there quiet, that is just not achievable in any other way. So I tell moms that I want to give them a bag of tricks that they can use. None of the tricks will work all the time, but hopefully when one doesn't, then something else will. So included in that bag of tricks is swaddling.
He loves to be swaddled up like this, and then to have him pacify it. Where is it? Here it is, look. Okay, and then I place him right here down the middle, and I just grab his little arm and I place it right here down his side. I grab this end and then I turn him over a little bit, then I tuck him down. And then you bend their feet a little bit, you grab the bottom of it, you put it right here on the side, tuck it in a little bit as well. Grab this arm and then you put it in right there, you grab the bottom part, and then you just fold it around like that, and then you just lay them down.
When they're really little, you can just kind of gather their arms and their legs up together and hold your hand there on the front. And as you move them, if you'll move them in that position, they're less likely to get really upset.
With my son, I want to hug him, I want to kiss him, I want to cuddle with him, and at times he doesn't like that. No matter what I tried to do, he wouldn't calm down until I would swaddle him up and lay him aside, give him his pacifier. Once he was out of my arms, in his swing, he would calm down.
These babies are not able to habituate to stimuli. So if something bothers them, it just bothers them more and more instead of tuning it out. So somehow we have to help those nerves to kind of relax and not be quite so hypersensitive. So what I want is for the mother to be able to come to the hospital and already know that she has lots of things to offer and special things that the rest of us can't offer, even as therapists and nurses and physicians.
So, in that video, I was giving you some different ideas about some intervention strategies that we're going to talk about. Take some notes about all of these because these are your bag of tricks. I use that same term to say that this is something that I want to help you with. I came here with a bag of tricks, nothing you can physically see, but stuff that I can tell you to make your life and that child's life a little bit easier and to help cope. So, some intervention strategies that help with that central nervous system disturbances, reduce the stimuli in the environment. So I come into a classroom and all the windows are open, the overhead lights are on, there's lots of really loud music. Those teachers really like their music sometimes, and they'll crank up the radio stations to break up their day a little bit. They get really loud. There's 7 other infants in the classroom that are crying. There's a bunch of people in and out going on. Reduce the stimuli. So something that I talk about is turn those lights off. If you have windows in your classroom or windows at home, open up the windows. That is much better light in your environment than it is to have those overhead lights on for a child. I'm sorry. Just tell me to move when you need me to move, okay? So keeping the lights dim as well. Working in child care centers, I know this trick, but it's really hard sometimes because you've got to remember that these child care centers that you're going to are also DHS licensed and they have a lot of regulations. So I know that I can sit there and talk to my program evaluator and just be like, listen, you can write me up all you want for having all my lights off in my classroom and having the windows open and all this stuff, but it makes the environment for these children, because we had 8 infants in one classroom when I got there. That's way too much. You have all of these children crying like in a domino effect from each other. The lights are on, it's so bright, and I came in and there was like 5 volunteers in there sitting around, and it was too much for those children. So the number one thing I did was turn off those lights or have a dimmer in the classroom and kind of turn them down a little bit. The same thing at home. Stop using those overhead lights, maybe use lamps, turn those on instead. That's one way that you can reduce the stimuli. Also, if you have Sesame Street playing in the background all the time, that's one of those things that it's really hard at home when you have that loud, constant noise. And parents think sometimes that they're teaching their child to look over that noise. I know we've heard a lot of those, like, people with old wives, oh, come on, just vacuum around the house when that baby's young, get them used to that loud noise. That doesn't work with these children. It actually makes it worse. So we don't want to introduce any stimuli that's really, really loud and noisy and bright. Respond quickly to crying. That's not spoiling the child. That's another one of the things that we have to talk a lot about. I don't want to spoil my child. I don't want them to think that that I'm spoiling them by picking them up all the time. You're not. This child does not have the ability to calm themselves down. And so when they are giving you those early warning signs, those little whimpers, those little cries, that's their warning sign to you to say, you better pick me up or it's about to go down here in a few minutes. So you want to teach them to pick them up in those early warning signs, when they're sneezing, when they're starting to whimper, respond early to crying. Swaddle. It's one of those things that I'm constantly talking about to these families. Have you tried swaddling? They're like, oh, yeah, but he doesn't really like it. But have you tried it? Like, let me show you. Do you care if I step in here and show you a little bit? Okay, so here's what you do, and I'll teach them to swaddle. Okay, now, so we're going to try this together. Show me what you do. Swaddling is the #1 recommended thing to do for children that have NAS, swaddling. I will tell you this, that if you have a child that is that's in a child care center, they are not allowed to swaddle because that's a DHS regulation that it's against the SIDS rule. However, if you have a child that has NAS, they can get a note from their pediatrician that states that they can be swaddled because that is a soothing technique. That is something you need to talk to them about. Now, I had a pediatrician on call that I used to be able to call, and I had a form, and actually I can send that out to you all. That was my job as an advocate, was to go and be like, okay, I'm going to talk to this PCP about all of this because they are not educated. They do not know what swaddling is for children with NAS. That is like me saying that this children that has autism doesn't need to use, weighted vests, or doesn't need to do OT, or all these different things that we adapt for these children. This is a diagnosis. NAS is a diagnosis, and a lot of pediatricians are not up to date on what does it mean when I say swaddling. So if I get a call back from their pediatrician saying, oh, that's actually not recommended in the American Pediatrics Association, then I right back send them, okay, well, here's something that does show that swaddling helps as a soothing technique for children with NAS. So I teach those parents to be advocates. This is something very, very important because the most stimulating place I can think of for a child to be is in daycare. And so you're setting them up. You're setting that teacher up. You're setting that child up. You're setting the teacher to be stressed out. So being that person to back up and say, wait a minute, if it's NAS, we can call the pediatrician. Mom would have to do it, but call the pediatrician and say, this is something that my EI has talked about, that swaddling is something that's a very, very strong soothing and calming and therapeutic hold. That's something we can talk about, use those words, therapeutic holding and therapeutic swaddling is for NAS. And so that's something that you can use in your bag of tricks to help that child adapt to their environment. Some other things, skin-to-skin contact, doing a lot of that kangaroo care, the skin-to-skin contact. I talk to foster families, not really sure as much about what they're limited and what they're limited not to do, but we talk about adapted kangaroo care. Usually kangaroo care is for the bio mom. That's something that's bonding with that child. But kangaroo care is also really important for a child no matter what. It's really important for them to be able to regulate their heart rate because we know that increasing heart rate is a sign or symptom of NAS. It helps their body temperature. We also know that body temperature is a symptom from NAS. It helps their breathing. We know that breathing is another symptom of NAS. All of these things that are helping regulate their body and their cycle from kangaroo care is very, very beneficial. So we do modified kangaroo care. Tank tops. That's what we do. That's something they feel comfortable with. I'm not getting down to my bra because I'm afraid the DCS worker is going to freak out and tell them that or show them that. But those children need that skin-to-skin contact. So using your arm with a tank top on. Or I've had a mom that was talking to me that she does it just by the child resting their head on a low-cut shirt that she wears. So modifying that kangaroo care, but if you do have a biological family, it's very important to talk about kangaroo care, and also if they're breastfeeding, really supporting that choice to breastfeed because a million different reasons the breastfeeding is good for that child, their GI system, that can't process formula very well because there's so many chemicals in it. Breast milk is the easiest thing for them their bodies to process. It's also a really good way for that child to bond with the parent. That's why kangaroo care is so great, is that they're getting that skin-to-skin contact with that person. They're smelling all those nice chemicals on their body, and they're lowering their heart rate, all those goody tricks of kangaroo care. Humming and singing softly. I say humming and singing softly as in very, very softly. That's not that mom that was doing in that video. Shh, which is doing that right in that baby's ear. I'm talking about that sweet, voice. And I tell the moms, that I worked with, you can rock out to whatever music in your head you want to, but you cannot sing that. You can't sing that to that child. You can modify it to like a very nice little lullaby and hum it. Limit caregivers. So thinking about that Thanksgiving, going from one person to the next person to the next person. Everybody wants to see the baby. That mom needs to know that, this is limiting people that this child is going to. And plus, they need to be able to bond with that one person. So limiting that all, like 5 different people every single day of the week, one person is different taking care of that child. That's very hard for that child because they also can't bond to one person. So try to limit the caregivers. And also massage. We'll talk about that a little bit later this afternoon after we finish lunch. We'll talk about massage and those sort of techniques. So for intervention strategies for overstimulation, like we were talking about, leaving that child alone. A lot of times I have moms that says, I've tried swaddling, I've tried the humming, I do one thing at a time, I've given them their passing, I do all of these things. Sometimes it's a sensory issue. Sometimes that child does not want to be touched. Like that mom was talking about in the video, the only thing that she could do was swaddle her child and put them down. Also, if you swaddle them and put them down when you're getting frustrated, or that caregiver, not you, because you guys are cool as a cucumber, but if that caregiver is getting frustrated and you back up, that child is not being abused. The child is not being held too tightly. That child is not having shaken baby syndrome. You're not neglecting that child. You're swaddling them and you're putting them down on a safe surface, not on a couch. Let's talk about that because those babies can roll right over, especially we know that 2-week-old baby that can flip over, on its own because of the high muscle tone. But we're putting them down somewhere safe, in the floor, and mom walks in here to get a bottle of water because mommy needs a timeout. Foster mom needs a timeout. Foster dad just needs to take a break for a minute because he's about to lose it. Doing that sometimes can help. Swaddling them, putting them in their crib, and walking away for a few minutes. Sometimes you are the overstimulation. Sometimes just by holding them is overstimulating them. And as a last resort, I always say, swaddle them and put them down and walk away. Not completely, come back. Make sure to come back. Don't pick up that infant and constantly do a shh and walk around. That was one reason why I really wanted to do a training for all of my staff when I was at Helen Austin McNabb, because we have midnight staff that would come in and they would be there overnight, and if that child woke up in the middle of the night, I would hear, by the next day the mom was like, they were picking up my baby, and I'd walking around and doing all these bouncing things, and this is what I used to do to my baby when I had a baby, 20 years ago, and I was like, no! So I wanted to educate everybody so everyone knew those basic little techniques, is that if you have, grandma at your house and she's doing all those techniques, then we can say, oh, okay, too much for baby. Let's talk about some things that we can do to help soothe the baby, not overstimulate the baby. Sleeplessness. This is something that may or may not follow that child later into their life. It's one of the biggest symptoms that I usually hear parents talk about is the sleeplessness. What do I do if this child doesn't sleep for more than 4 hours at a time ever? And we'll talk about what to do now and what to do later on. Swaddle. Number 1 in the bag of tricks, swaddle. Try swaddling. Try partial swaddling. Try doing that. That means you don't have to swaddle the whole body. I never even swaddle a baby with their legs. I never do that. I only swaddle the arms, get their arms over to cross the midline. That's more comfortable for the child. Try not to swaddle a child with their arms down. That's not comfortable for us. I would not want to sleep like this, but it's more comfortable to have our arms cross the midline. That's what's comfortable for them. And so when you're swaddling, try to make sure their hands are coming together in the middle. Use the pacifier. That'll also help regulate breathing and regulate the sucking. Gentle, soothing touches. That's something that we have to talk a lot about. And I usually have to demonstrate this to a family and ask, would you mind if I use your arm and show you the pressure that I'm talking about when I talk about gentle touching. Don't automatically, let me just show you this, because again, think about that trauma-informed care. We don't want to touch somebody without asking permission first. So I kind of show them that practice. I'm talking about a lot of times of doing 1 or 2 fingers around the head, going down this way, touching the ears, touching their arms and their legs. Now you may have a kiddo that is sensitive to that, so that's in our bag of tricks that we're saying this kid has sensory issues, we may not need to use the touching, but that's just one of those techniques that you can try. A lot of children do really like that light brushing on their face. Using the swing to calm an infant, that's something that she talks about in the video too, that she swaddled her baby and put them in the swing, and that's just what he likes, that calming, moving, and that motion. Now, remember that usually swings now have all these crazy things about them. There's sounds, and there's crickets chirping, and there's things moving, and there's lights, and there's stars, and it's a lot. So remember that and remind them that maybe let's start with just one. Maybe let's do the heartbeat setting. Let's try with that one and just do the swinging with the swaddle. That typically works really well. Ensuring that the diaper is clean. These children use their diapers quite a bit. And also, those, like we talked about the diarrhea, they use the bathroom a lot. And so making sure that their diaper is very, very clean before they go down, that's usually one of those infant 101 things, but not everybody knows that. So, and talking about that is really important. And also, a biggie is vertical, moving up and down when you're holding the child. So if you're wanting to bounce, one at a time, remember, we're not going to do this and put a toy in their face. We're going to do one at a time. So I'm going to try the bounces. I'm going to hold them, and I'm going to bounce them up and down like this. Or I can do this and pretend that I'm, getting my exercise in and do squats and bounce with them like this. So what we don't want to do is just see them sideways and doing this. Their central nervous system and their brain cannot quickly process that input. So not going side to side, even though this is very natural, I still pick up a baby and want to do this as a natural movement, because that's just what you kind of see people do when you're growing up around children. You see people picking that baby up and just bouncing them around. Don't do it. Put them in the front. You can, and even if you're putting them like this towards you, you may be overstimulating them by doing that. Or you could be helping them. You kind of just have to, if I had a baby right now, I wouldn't want them to see all of you, no offense, because that's too overstimulating. So I would put them against me, doing some kangaroo care too, and doing some bouncing like this.
Can I ask real quickly?
Yeah.
You're talking about using a swing.
Yes.
Is the same true for the swing?
It is. If you can have a swing, she was asking about, is it the same for the swing? If you can find a swing, I know that the Mama Roo, is that what I'm thinking? They have the ones that go up and down. I've even seen NICUs that have those. Those are better. If you have a child that has NAS and they use a swing and they're tolerating it okay, that's fine. Or you could find one that just vibrates. That's always good too. But sometimes that swinging, they're like, they don't like their swing. Well, that's why, is because sometimes going back and forth like this is too much. Going front to back, a lot of them can change the positions is better than a lot of times them going side by side. But a lot of them like the swing a lot. So also, something that we'll talk about later on too with the older kiddos is that they have trouble going to sleep sometimes. And then the number one thing is staying asleep. So you have this kid that goes to sleep and it's like they don't have a problem, but they can't stay asleep. They're not getting into those REM cycles. That's an issue. So all of those things are what's going to help the swaddle. And that's just something they're going to wake up sometimes. But the swaddling will help. What it's doing is that when they wake up, and sometimes they'll have those jerks in the middle of the night, that's what's waking them up. And so if you have a child in a swaddle, then a lot of times those jerks will, with the compression of the swaddle, will help their brain release some relaxing chemicals, and it will remind them that, oh, I need to be relaxed and go to sleep. So it's just a little trick that you can do to help them go back into that next REM cycle. Okay, so we're gonna practice all of these things that we just talked about. That's why you brought your babies. I have 3 babies up here. I also have, Teresa brought some blankets out for us that we're going to try to pass out. We're going to share some, but who does not have a baby? Anybody have a baby? All right, does everybody have a baby? Okay, what I want you to do. All right, everybody look up here. I know what we're gonna do. Okay, I want everybody to get their baby, and I want you to get a partner. I want you to get a partner, and I want one of you to be the mom or the foster mom, you decide, that just got this baby. Just got this baby. They came back from the NICU, or they were just got this child as a foster child, and they have no idea what to do. This baby is crying all the time. It's not sleeping. And the other one of you in that pair is going to be the EI. You're going to be the person that's coming in, giving some tricks. What are you going to tell them? And something that I want you to know is that when you are doing this, when we're demonstrating this, remember when you're talking to these families that you're saying, here, let me show you, this is what you do. Okay, you got it? We've got to remember that they need to practice this too. So how are you going to talk to them about, okay, I want you to take a try now. Now show me how you do it. Show me what did you get from what I just showed you. Remember that they need time to process that themselves. This is how we do it. I want you to help practice together. So remember that.
Can you show them one time?
Oh, yeah. I didn't even show you. Okay, so I might need you to hold the mic for me. Oh, sorry. This is, I forget because I'm around it all the time. So this is my, this is my shaken baby syndrome baby. And so it shows you the different areas of its brain that's affected. So when you shake it, the different areas light up to show you that that's what's damaging the brain. I'm sorry, it looks like really weird and I forget to tell people what it is. Okay, so this is actually the average size baby. This is about like an 8-pound baby. So I meant to show you the difference between this baby and the baby that has NAS, or this is actually a fetal alcohol syndrome baby. And so when you hold them side by side, it's a very great difference. This is just an average meaty baby that's got lots of fat on its body. Thank you. This is a fetal alcohol syndrome baby. These are the difference. Fetal alcohol syndrome babies are also very, very low birth weight. And I'll talk a little bit about this if anybody would like to know about fetal alcohol syndrome. But what we were actually talking about earlier is that there's not as many fetal alcohol syndrome diagnoses because a lot of times if a mother is drinking alcohol, she's also using other substances too. So they just call it substance exposure. So anyway, this is fetal alcohol syndrome baby, and then a regular newborn. You can see the difference in their body weights. So when you are doing a swaddle, I like to talk to the family about what are some different strategies that you use when your baby is overstimulated or when your baby is crying, and most of the time they'll give you all those shh, and moving around and doing all these things. And so that's when I come in and say, oh, I am so happy that we're working together because I have a really great bag of tricks that I'm going to show you and I'm going to share with you about NAS. Because the number one thing that people don't realize is swaddling helps that child so much. And I explained very, very in layman terms about what's happening. That compression that child is feeling is reminding them of the same feeling they were in utero. They're very tight. They're, you see a NICU nurse or a delivery nurse, what does she do? She swaddles that baby and puts it in their little crib in the nursery. And so that's something naturally that we do so we don't overstimulate a regularly developing child to when they're coming out into the world and they're all of a sudden flailing around everywhere. We want them to be comforted by feeling as if they are back in the womb. And so that's what swaddling is. So what I talk to families about is getting your blanket And these are perfect blankets because these are really stretchy. And when we pass them out, I'll show you. The stretchier, the better. This is the perfect blanket because the stretchier it is, the easier it is you're going to get tension when you're pulling it. Cotton blankets are not the best, but the kind of blankets that they give you when your child is born, those type of blankets that are just cotton, like I had one of, oh, this one. Thank you. This one that's just a regular cotton blanket, it doesn't give a lot, so when I'm trying to tuck that child in, it doesn't work that well. So what I usually ask is for the family, like, give me some of the blankets that your child likes or your child uses. When they bring me a fleece blanket, I'm like, oh, not a good option. Those big heavy blankets that you're bringing me that have a lot of like pricklies on the end, that are really tickling the child is not the best option because one, we know that there's hyperthermia there and that they're going to get overly heated, which is going to do the opposite and make them cry even more. So these are perfect because they're breathable, they're thin, and they're stretchy. Do a good job. But look how big that is. We could use this for a 12-month-old. This is perfect. So I take those blankets and I say, okay, let's lay that blanket down and pick up it like it's a diamond, flip over that one edge, that's where the baby is going to go. And so pretend that I'm laying the baby down. Okay, so I lay the baby down like this. What am I going to do with the arms? Bring them to the midline. So I'm going to bring them over like this. Now, when you get to that point, they're going to fight. They're going to fight because they're really tight. And remind mom and the family about this, that they're going to fight it. And they're going to say, oh, I told you so. I don't like it. But that's just because of that atypical development, that they're really high muscle tone. So bring those over, and I take one hand and put it over the child's arms to keep them at midline. I take the other end, wrap it around, and I do this magical trick where I switch out my underhand and put my hand over the hands that are underneath the blanket. Does that make sense? So I'm switching out my hands because you have to hold these hands. They will flail them around everywhere. That's why this is so important, is that you hold those arms, come over, switch out your hands, so that the blanket is over. Can everybody see okay? The blanket is over their arms. Tuck that behind as much as you can behind here. And this is the really important part, is this is where you want to get that tension. So if the baby's laying down, I'm pulling on this side. That's why this is so stretchy and so great, is that you're pulling it to get tension on it and then wrapping it around like that. You do not have to do any fancy swaddling. You do not have to tuck that in or do the little stuff on the bottom. None of that. The main part that you want that child to be swaddled is the upper part of their body, those arms, because mostly the legs are not going to be causing much of a problem. And if you leave this open a little bit, here's a cool trick, you can do partial swaddling. So I can keep this up here really tight. And if my baby is having a hard time going through diaper change routines, then I can pull up the swaddle a little bit, and oh, look, there's the diaper. My baby is still swaddled and still feeling safe and in control and very tight. But now I have the diaper exposed, so I can change the diaper after I get that diaper changed. I can pull this back down. And also, if they're getting overly heated, I can move it up a little bit and give them some air. So, all right, I taught you how to do it. We're done. Not what we would do. So that's where this practice comes in. That's where you would come in and say, okay, now that I've showed you, would you mind if we work together? Let's practice this. Because this is really important for you to understand that swaddling is such a great trick to use to help your child calm down. So, yes?
To what age would you recommend swaddling?
To what age can we recommend swaddling? If the child is rolling over, sometimes they do not like swaddling anymore because they're more independent. Sometimes when they're still like 9 months old and having a hard time with their excessive sucking when they're taking a bottle, so I only swaddle for maybe just doing diaper changes, or maybe just swaddle just for bottles. Or if the child is really young, I can still swaddle for as long as I can.